Welcome to the film analysis. Today with Black Panther, Wakanda Forever by Ryan Coogler. In 2018, the first part was released in cinemas and experienced a strange reception. Liberals were enthusiastic and New Right celebrated this film. For different reasons, you might think that is only partly true. Liberals concentrated mainly on representation. Finally, a diverse cast, finally black superheroes. The New Right appreciated the film's allegorical meaning. They had no problems with representation. While they weren't happy about the black cast, they looked at the film through the interpreter's lens, asking themselves, how does the film relate to me? What is it telling? The first Black Panther told a story of a compartmentalization with the country of Wakanda, ruled by a royal family by King T'Challa. A clear hierarchical order prevails, everyone is in their place, and they try to keep away from the outside world, to seal themselves off, to preserve the wealth, the culture and the identity, reminiscent of the New Right concept of ethnopluralism. It stems from a misguided post-colonial reading. One recognizes that colonialism existed, but draws ethnopluralist conclusions from it. It would be best if everyone stayed in the place they were meant to be, nicely segregated from each other, creating a world order lacking any interference, human rights no longer playing any role. One thing or another may happen in any place, but that is none of the other nation's business. This very fantasy of isolation and identity persists in Wakanda Forever. The film focuses on identity. Not only does the successor Wakanda Forever continue its predecessor's wrongdoings, but we witness even more issues in these 160 agonizing minutes. Chadwick Boseman played King T'Challa and died. Now they haven't just cast a new actor, but have continued the story differently. First, there is his mother, Queen Ramonda, now the ruler of Wakanda. She appears before the UN assembly with a certain arrogance. A discussion arises whether Wakanda should make vibranium available to the other countries. It is this wonderful substance resource creating an incredible amount of energy. It may be used in two ways, a dual-use resource. It allows energy independence, but you can also wage a kind of nuclear war with it. That is why Wakanda are trying to deny other countries access. The West, however, is trying to find vibranium through other channels to gain the same power. The Western industrialized nations, embodied above all by America, face each other as competitors in global capitalism like companies. But the film criticizes white dominance thinking or Western dominance thinking. However, in truth, neither thinking nor ideologies prove to be decisive, but rather global capitalism. Nation-states compete in global competition. The film fails in this regard as it centers identity instead. Both in the film and in the current debates on identity, the actors willfully ignore the economic, resulting in sham debates unintentionally exposed by Wakanda Forever. The new issue of Wakanda Forever is not only Western imperialism, but Talokan, hidden deep in the sea, reminiscent of Atlantis, also possessing vibranium and suddenly striving for world supremacy. Suddenly, ruler Namor appears from Talokan, proceeding not quite smoothly. He not only represents a villain, but questions the self-image of Ramonda and her daughter Shuri. Why do you think you are allowed to rule? What about us? Why don't we also have a right to it? Here, two states are in competition with each other, it is almost the same situation as in the UN Assembly. Wakanda Forever wrestles with subtle ambiguities. In the first part, Killmonger expressed universalism and died as a consequence, while King T'Challa only fought for the interests of his country. Killmonger wanted to free the oppressed from all over the world. In the second part, this universalism is absent. The film adheres to the thought pattern of the identitarian representing the new hegemony, not only at Disney. The film is not stingy in its production. It almost seems as if the cameras swimming through the ocean world offer a foretaste of Avatar 2. The film is characterized by a copying design. For example, when the royal family is in session combining both futurism and tribalism, we encounter this international style in a toned down from everywhere, from Dubai to New York, or just think of the new soccer stadiums in Qatar. It is pure ethno-futurism. The rituals performed are impressive in their formal rigor. We witness a potpourri of blockbuster elements, overstimulating the viewer. If a film makes it so easy for itself aesthetically, the simplicity of the content is all the less surprising. The inhabitants of the underwater world of Talokan resemble ethno-kitsch at best, worthy of closer inspection. They differ from humans, exhibiting animalism, not possessing mouths, having gill-like masks in front of their mouths. The film de-individualizes them. We see a people without experiencing them as individuals. Only ruler Namo and his sister have faces, probably entitling them to rule. So the hierarchy here becomes total. The camera looks exotically at the sea creatures, not as equals to the citizens of Wakanda. Talokan wants to ascend. Wakanda cannot and will not allow an equal partner next to it. We are talking about two nuclear powers. How about Wakanda submitting? A delicate situation political scientists and geostrategists are dealing with quite a lot now. We talk about the Thucydides trap. How can one empire rise and another fall? For example, China rise and the West fall without a world war. Is cooperation possible? In Wakanda Forever, everything boils down to war. The film is not a testament to anti-imperialism, rather it just implements the Western salvation story with a diverse cast. The film suggests that China should follow Talokan's lead and submit. The question is whether the Chinese will identify with Wakanda and look at this film and think equally the US could submit. No coincidence, as Marvel pursues this very openness as a global business model, appealing to every nation due to its identitarian character and thinking purely geostrategical. It is not about cooperation, but about victorious peace due to submission. The film takes viewers to new worlds, only repeating the local, however. This leads us back to subjugation. We wallow in the exoticism of the others. Shuri stays in Talokan as a tourist, a bit like going ashore on Love Boat, telling stories of a cruise ship. Shuri is amazed by the others. At the same time, she registers the supposed danger laying in strangeness. Wakanda Forever confirms typical Hollywood narratives depicting the foreign and the other as a potential threat, as if a film like Arrival had never existed. The film repeats this Hollywood scheme with other representatives. Both the first Black Panther and Wakanda Forever are under the delusion that if others confirm this schema, it is not problematic. Aesthetics professor Bason Brock beautifully summed up this idiocy in a lecture. He questions the logic of declaring the other the enemy, rendering it merely an excuse to behave like the enemy without being it. Brock said, "If you are my enemy and I do this publicly, everything I say is quite obviously distinct from what you say. And even if I say exactly the same thing as you, it is something quite different. Because if two say the same thing, it is not the same after all, because they are enemies." This is exactly what happens again and again. For example, the far-right German party AfD is declared an enemy, while at the same time the other parties pursue policies just as hostile to migration, but act as if they are something totally different. Both are wrong, no matter which party identity one belongs to. Because one is not the other, this identity logic suddenly allows everything, exactly what we are witnessing in Wakanda Forever. Western imperialism is declared the enemy, not to seek an alternative world order, but to be unrecognizably imperialist oneself. At its discretion and without democratic legitimacy, Wakanda decisively decides on resources and degrades Talokan to a vassal state. The character drawing suggests ethnic inferiority, Wakanda above, Talokan below, representing not only a geographical order, but rather essentialist identity thinking. In his excellent film review, Yannick Nolting writes, "On both sides, centuries-old stereotypes of nature-loving nativeness are reproduced. Their realities of life are hermetically sealed, grouped together, easily identifiable systems. A humanity no longer exists, only people striving for restored divisions. A withdrawal from the rest of the world is translated into state doctrine and claims to power." Wakanda Forever does not open new perspectives, but merely says, now it's our turn. The supposed fight against American imperialism seems paradoxical, since the film fights the battle with the cultural means and imagery of this very American imperialism. Blockbuster cinema, Disney, Marvel, etc. Where the identitarian has long dominated global thinking, in all countries, world leaders come to mind easily. The reference to the identitarian is decisive to win elections. Discussion tied to identity issues prevails. Both Wakanda Forever and the debate prove to be insultingly lazy. The injustice of history, as we all know, cannot be changed. Time cannot be reverted. It is the deadly idea of revenge, suggesting you can establish justice now when you still have this one fight to fight. After that, it's over. This drives both empires in the film to war. The living cannot change the past. Instead, the ancestor cult pervades the film. The ancestors call it "the ancestors wanted," the film states abundantly, resulting in not just clannishness, but ancestorhood, abolishing the idea of equality. Identity politics have reached a point where it is now only a matter of the ruled being allowed to be rulers for once. Take, for example, the thoughtless comedian Trevor Noah. He accuses the British of criticizing Prime Minister Rishi Sunak only based on his Indian identity, behaving like an Indian colonial ruler to the British. This is utter nonsense, nor is wrongfully applying American discourse to British society. Crucially, Sunak is a hardcore neoliberal determined to apply harsh social cuts. But one must remain silent as Sunak has the right identity. The film denies rational argument. Insight never stems from argument. Only recollection of identity leads to change. Remember the ancestors, thank to the ancestors. The film states over and over Princess Shuri does not derive her war strategy rationally, but from the memory of the ancestors. These ancestors cause a turnaround reminiscent of The Lion King. Simba catches sight of his father in the starry night and suddenly realizes, this is my path. I must follow in my father's footsteps. I too must become king. A little thought experiment illustrates how idiotic this way of thinking is. Should Germans be advised to follow in the footsteps of their grandparents? Better not. Back to Wakanda Forever. May the ancestors stand by us. Another Wakanda overall follows suit almost as a logical consequence. The essentialism of difference of identitarian thinking hurts the film and dulls the discourse. We should quote the German philosopher Markus Quent here. In his, I'm usually carefully with the word, brilliant essay, Conformisms, he writes, instead of using difference to shake identity, one has moved to identify all differences because one aims to represent everything differing. One creates an identity for everything, attaches everything to an identity. With the best of intentions, one assigns difference its rightful place in the order of identity and representation, which one leaves untouched and finally confirms. The predominant practice of identification in everyday life is to standardize in advance every previously unknown characteristic, every supposed cultural idiosyncrasy, every physical deficit, every style of clothing, every eating habit, and to equip it into an unmistakable attitude to life. Where life has long since escaped, the differences are more and more eagerly prepared, despite the accompanying denunciation of universal truth and absolute claims to validity. The characteristic then takes the position of the old absolute in the mode of exclusion, which one desired to wave goodbye to originally. Wakanda Forever renders identity absolute. Those who invoke the ancestors are right. The anti-modernism of the film and of identity thinking is frightening. Towards the end, the film depicts the deceased father's car as a newly polished tin box. This car too still breathes the spirit of the tradition. This tribalism has long since arrived in the real world, with pseudo-history shaping everything. The geopolitical conflict in Wakanda Forever never doubts states, but takes them for granted. A people is a given, therefore, following this logic, danger always comes from the other country, from the other people. The film reels off the universalist idea of human rights. Russia, Hungary, or China surely applaud this notion. The film never characterizes identity as a process of becoming. Rather, the ideology prevails here: I am what I am. At most, one becomes what one has always been, if one recalls the ancestors. Quite the anti-emancipatory moment. Emancipation means, for example, dismissing patriarchal rule, leaving your parents' house, going outside. In the film, you must simply find your identity. Modern people, however, would have to deny the one fixed identity, consisting rather of a mixture of many things. Identity itself means a difference. One is not identical with oneself, looks in the mirror, but still does not recognize oneself. All this would constitute the modern view, but the film differs from that. Shuri is advised to deal with King Namor, show him who you are. This essentialism is astonishing. Shuri accepting it is equally surprising. She is a technologist originally wanting to wave goodbye to the ancestors, not valuing tradition. But to succeed, she must embrace identity. She is applying this logic to many state leaders suddenly working out the national core, staging herself in an identitarian way to win an election. According to Marcus Grant, radicalism and conformism are increasingly indistinguishable these days, all boiling down to a pathetic demand for recognition. This is how most people receive Wakanda Forever. It's nice to have everyone represented for once. Beyond that, thinking ceases to exist. One could also consider whether the law and order structure prevailing in both Wakanda and Talokan makes sense. It does not allow any deviation or dissidence. Those who are recognized as dissidents must even die, if necessary. Think of Killmonger. There is no longer any willingness for debate. Philosopher Quent writes in his book, "The present dominant and depoliticized form of politicization by means of identities and ways of life has assimilated itself to the thinking of origin, rank and order, not only in its humorlessness." We could talk about that too. Wakanda Forever turns out to be terribly humorless, not only in its humorlessness, but also in the absence of any idea of political transformation. The accompanying culture of respect appeals completely to the logic of domination, where once one affirmed disturbance, gaps and indeterminacy to create a resistance precisely starting from the irreducible. Today one tries to defeat evil by regulating every space of a behavior in which ambivalent, non-ambiguous disturbance could occur. The will to be unambiguous and the inability to endure and savor the ambiguous, the ambivalent, the resistance of reality constitute the one-dimensionality of today's thinking. It's a testament to the mustiness of the supposedly subcultural, the conformity of the supposedly subversive. Everything disrupt, end of quote, everything disruptive is killed or must submit to Wakanda. Wakanda Forever is a musty film for a musty zeitgeist that only makes you watch, but not see. It would be nice if you would like to support the film analysis financially. You can do so via my bank account or PayPal. Also, you can find me on Patreon. Thank you very much.